All right, thank you, Chad, and thank you, Tableland and Ceramic, for having us today. As mentioned, my name is Doug Petkanics. I'm the founder of a project called Livepeer, which has been on a 7-year mission to build the world's open video infrastructure. It's one of the original DePIN projects. Thanks everyone for sort of bearing with me today. I'm a little under the weather, so apologies if my voice sounds weird or if I have to sneeze or whatnot. But I'm going to power through for an energetic talk on a topic that I think is really important, which is making sure that sort of access to artificial intelligence and models and infrastructure remains open, and how decentralized technologies play a key role in that and are a really important part. AI plus crypto is not just, a meme or a pivot from failed AI or failed crypto companies or the search for the next narrative. Decentralization actually plays a critical role in this next wave of technical innovation. I'm going to talk about that from a couple different perspectives. One is fighting the risk of regulatory capture of the AI industry, related to one of the questions that was asked during the last panel around, can we trust a couple government agencies to determine who does and who does not have access to this transformative technology? I'm going to talk about just access to models and compute and making sure that's available for innovation, and practically what's being done within our project at Livepeer, but also across many of the DePIN, or decentralized physical infrastructure networks, that are being built in the space today. Be about 10, 12 minutes, and hopefully we have time for a question or two at the end as well. So first, I think everyone probably has observed and hopefully has noticed how much artificial intelligence is accelerating, how quickly the industry is moving. You saw this just in the last 18 months or so. In late 2022, large language models sort of hit the market, and consumers sort of connected with the power of them through the release of ChatGPT by OpenAI, where they can interact in a text-based chat mode-centric way. Around the same time and a little later, we've seen the rise of heavier forms of media interactions in generative models with the release of generative image models. Things like DALL-E 2, Midjourney are both, sort of the closed versions. Or, Scott was here from Stability. They released Stable Diffusion. Many thanks to Stability for releasing that, a great open image generation models, and there's many others that are coming along the way. And it's moving faster. I think there was sort of a breakthrough moment just a week and a half ago when OpenAI released sort of the research preview of Sora, their diffusion video generation model. And this sort of blew people's minds that with a prompt of text, you can generate a 10 to 60 second video using AI that looks realistic, that formerly would have required cameras, production crews, post-production, editing, lighting, the whole shebang. This is already opened up the eyes of the world and impacted the industry. Just the other day, Tyler Perry, one of the most successful media creators and producers of all time, announced that he's pausing a $700 million investment in a Atlanta production studio because he's observing what's happened in AI. He saw how it's going to flip the industry on its head. And he said, this is a bad investment right now. I need to take a pause and rethink how this technology is going to reshape everything about how we create and consume media going forward. So this incredible technology, though, doesn't just come for free. It comes at a high cost in terms of access to models that can be trained and can be run, for inference to, generate these types of outputs. And it comes in a high cost of infrastructure in terms of GPUs or compute that's necessary to actually, train and run these models as well. And that's reflected really strongly in the growth of the company that actually produces this computing power called NVIDIA, that makes the GPUs that are used to train and run these models. What you see here is a quarterly growth chart of their data center business, or how many GPUs they've sold, largely for AI training and inference. Last quarter alone, they sold $18 billion of data center GPUs, up from $14 billion the quarter before, $10 billion the quarter before, and only $4 billion a year ago. That's acceleration in a nutshell. And these heavy models that require a lot of compute, like the video generation models, aren't even available for the public or businesses to play with and iterate with, but they're just beginning to come soon. So I don't expect this acceleration curve to slow down anytime soon, as long as they can keep up with the manufacturing and the production. It's worth noting, over half of this sort of revenue last quarter came from just 4 big tech cloud companies. Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform GCP, Amazon Web Services, and OpenAI, I think was through Microsoft was the other that plays in that race. You can't actually get access to these high performance compute machines, the A100s, the H100s, unless you're from NVIDIA, unless you're buying hundreds of millions of dollars at a time. And if you try and access it through the big tech clouds, good luck as a startup. If you have to reserve them months in advance, you have to commit to a high amount of spend. If you just want to access 10 instances on demand to train a model, good luck, it's not happening. And so we're really seeing a separation between sort of the gate-kept haves and have-nots that can spend hundreds of millions of dollars versus the startups that want to be innovative and disruptive. And so that's where I'm going to talk about why decentralizing AI actually matters, how decentralized technologies, crypto networks play a role to counterbalance this and combat this, and also why now is a super important moment. One of the first reasons that now matters a lot has to do with pending regulations. There's an executive order here in the United States signed by President Biden that's already in effect, and there's a bunch of milestones over the coming months that indicate how industry can interact with and build on AI in a compliant way. And it contains a lot of things that are really concerning. It says that if you're running an infrastructure and you're providing AI inference to customers, you have to KYC who's actually running these models in your data center. You have to reveal the identities to the US government if they are foreign nationals that are using your platform under certain conditions. If you want to train AI models of a certain size measured in how many floating point operations or integer operations you're doing in the training process, which is a totally arbitrary number determined by the government, you have to actually comply with departments like the Department of Commerce, and I even think like the Department of Agriculture, and there's 6 different agencies that play a role. And for any startup that's trying to innovate, find product market fit, focus on their users, that asking for government permission across 6 different agencies is just not in the cards and not something you can afford to do time-wise or cost-wise. There's vague testing requirements that your model must be tested, but there's no indication of what you have to test against. And there's centrally determined sort of content restrictions and biases that have to be inserted in terms of what you can or cannot do with AI. This sets up a scenario for what we call regulatory capture by the big tech cloud companies who already have proprietary models. They have a lead. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars on their compute, on training these things, and they're lobbying and they're helping the government write these laws because they can comply, and that helps preserve their advantage. They're saying everyone else has to comply too, but it's impossible for an innovator or a startup, and it creates a real moat around them. And this is going to be challenged in court in the coming months or years. There's a lot of things in there that are nonsensical and will be probably fought against and overturned, but that's, again, a battle that costs us time, and it stunts innovation in the industry. And we've seen these lessons play out when it comes to other forms of innovation, and we don't want that to happen in one of the most transformative types of technologies in our generation, which is AI. So that's sort of the regulatory risk, and that's playing out right now, these executive order. There's 6-month deadlines before some of these things come into effect. So we really have to build these open systems now. The second thing, which doesn't have to do with regulation, but was hinting at what I was alluding to before, is just there's limited access to the compute for innovative startups, decentralized tech projects, et cetera. Elon Musk is quoted as saying, GPUs are harder to get than drugs. Why is that? On the right, you see some news headlines about, I think Facebook just invested $10 billion to buy a batch of 60,000 plus H100 GPUs from NVIDIA, the same GPUs that no one else can access It says they're going to buy 350,000 of them to train their models and run inference. And so startups can't get access via the traditional paths, but even though the new high density cards aren't necessarily available directly, there's so much compute out there in existing idle capacities inside of things like crypto mining rigs, rendering farms, gaming engines, consumer grade GPUs. And when you actually create open marketplaces where people can make those available for AI and they can monetize them when they're otherwise idle, that amount of compute actually dwarfs what Facebook is spending billions of dollars buying here. And this is where using one of the superpowers of blockchain technology, which is permissionless global instant coordination, is really powerful, because you can use them to coordinate networks that are available to train and run inference on AI models. So decentralization here and blockchain technology is really key. It enables AI acceleration for the rest of us through decentralized infrastructures that can be used for AI and through open models that can be used regardless of what sort of biases and access controls OpenAI or Microsoft wants to put on your innovation as a startup. How is that possible? Why does decentralization help here? Why do DePIN networks have an advantage? They bring advantages across all the vectors that matter: scale, cost, reliability, and access. The scale one I think is most interesting. People might not realize it, but one of the superpowers of crypto economics and sort of open access networks is that they can bootstrap an entire supply side of capacity. In this case, you want to bootstrap an entire network of GPUs to be available for AI compute. You can do that through crypto economic incentives before there's even demand coming in to use that network and pay fees into that network. And why is that? It's because you're not creating this closed-walled network for yourself as a company that you own and you're monetizing yourself. You're saying anyone who brings compute, idle compute to these networks, they're becoming the owners of the network. They're the ones who are earning the tokens that represent ownership and future potential revenue that the network generates because they brought their compute early. And we've seen that model play out in Livepeer, I'll talk a little bit about that, and in many other DePIN networks that have bootstrapped an entire supply side prior to scaled usage and scaled demand coming on. And that's really powerful. Imagine you didn't have this capability, you weren't distributing ownership. How would you ever compete with Amazon Web Services? You'd have to invest tens of billions of dollars in data centers, hardware, bandwidth, and build the whole software orchestration layer on top. Whereas crypto gives you a superpower to congregate an entire army of infrastructure providers who can be owners in the network prior to that. Because these infrastructure providers are then competing on cost when demand does come in, and they say, I have an idle GPU, I'd like to make extra money for it, I'm willing to charge X amount to do an AI inference, like generate a video, and they're competing with the node down the street, you actually see price competition leading to the lowest possible costs, which is the opposite of what you see in the cloud, where you see them saying, oh, you actually have to pay me a markup and prepay for GPUs you'll get 4 months down the line, and you're reserving capacity whether you use it or not. And that's breakage, leakage, overhead cost that just can't compete when you have an on-demand, cost-competitive marketplace. When you do have these low costs, you can have more reliability, you can afford redundancies, and you can remove single points of failure. So if you get the infinitely scalable, most cost-effective, and most reliable networks for infrastructure, in this case AI compute, it seems like a no-brainer. And these protocols have superpowers where I think they should be powering the majority of the world's compute in the years to come. These open networks will allow people to train and run inference on open and unbiased models, not just subject to the biases that, say, Google injects into Gemini because their legal department said they had to, or their business models don't want to be disrupted by. You'll allow developers to pay as they go to access an abundant source of GPUs and not have to pre-reserve them in advance. And you'll see people can build these sort of innovative and kind of disruptive things like personal agents that we just heard about, LLM models, diffusion models, and they can do it, most importantly, not just here in the United States, but they can do it globally. And I think it's a huge mistake to think that AI is going to benefit humanity the most if we keep walled gardens around who can access the best models only in US data centers. Livepeer, the project I work on, we've been leading sort of the DePIN charge for 7 years now with an intense focus on video infrastructure. And our interest in AI here is obviously we've seen AI is going to change video with Sora and generative video, and it's going to create huge advantages in terms of quality improvement, post-production, compression, everything that video developers care about. We are bringing these capabilities to the network that already powers 3 million plus minutes of video transcoding on a huge network of thousands of GPUs every week. Our network is already 10 to 50 times more cost effective than many cloud options for video-centric compute. And when we see how expensive it is, like it takes 60 minutes of GPU compute to generate a 30-second video, that's very expensive. If these DePIN networks can drive down the cost, that's going to create an explosion of use cases and creative content that we want to be a part of enabling. So that's a big focus for us. We already power a lot of disruptive applications today, ranging from consumer apps like the Lot Radio streamed a concert with Fred again and Lil Yachty the other day. On the right, you see fishtank.live, a sort of edgy, real-world style internet TV show that the Reddit crowd has millions of users watching and paying millions of dollars in subscriptions to influence how creators are interacting and introducing crypto monetization and whatnot. I can't wait to see what these creative platforms do when generative AI video is available to them. This is sort of a technical slide that just shows we're going to introduce this onto our existing network, taking a sort of subnet-centric approach. We're going to allow people running AI inference, infrastructure clients and nodes to perform work for nodes that want to give prompts and generate video, but they'll be able to use the same existing Livepeer network for node discovery, security, payment settlement, and this is how you get these DePIN networks to actually expand out in capabilities, address bigger markets, and sort of use what works instead of have to take a super ambitious mission and build it from scratch. We have 6 years of a live network and lots of software built around it in video-centric use cases to take advantage of. So it's a bit about how we're going to approach it, but you've heard some names of other projects mentioned today, like Akash, which is a generic GPU marketplace that can perform inference. You've heard Jensen is focused on training. There's projects like Ritual, IONet, et cetera, that are all DePIN projects focused on democratizing access to AI. I'd just like to sort of close by emphasizing that we're all in it together because the time is now. You see how fast these technologies are accelerating. You see how they're under threat from regulatory capture and limited access that's controlled by a few big tech companies. And we really have a moment where if we can make these infrastructures open access and unstoppable, we can have open models on Hugging Face and other platforms that are accessible to all. It doesn't matter what one politician says about who can and can't do something with AI. It's sort of the cat's out of the box and the whole world will get the benefit of the innovation, but only if we move quickly to make these things work in the next couple of months. And I've seen that as a huge theme here at ETH Denver that's really focused a lot of the smartest people in the room. It's inspiring to be a part of, and I look forward to working with all of you and contributing to it in the months to come. So thank you very much.